This next story is a story that we talked about a little bit on our previous show. We hinted at it, we teased it, and said we wanted to do something a little bit more thorough. This has to do with the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is being challenged in the Supreme Court right now. And there was an article written in Forbes magazine, of all places, by Victor A. Lopez Carmen. And I thought I should read this because this was an op-ed printed in Forbes, which is hardly, a commie rag, right? So this is not like coming from a biased source. They are even talking about the need to uphold the ICWA. So I'm just going to read a few brief passages. In the coming weeks, the Supreme Court is expected to release its decision on Holland versus Brackeen, a case that challenges the constitutionality of the Indian Child Welfare Act. The plaintiffs, non-Indigenous Texan couple named Chad and Jennifer Brackeen, claim that the ICWA's preference for placing Indigenous children with foster parents from their tribal nations discriminates against non-Indigenous individuals who wish to adopt Indigenous children. Proponents of the ICWA, which include 486 tribal nations, assert the law's preference for Indigenous families promotes cultural well-being and is based on the political status of tribes rather than the social construct of race. According to the Native American Rights Fund, the ICWA does this by upholding family integrity and stability and by keeping Indian children connected to their community and culture. The ICWA also reaffirms the inherent rights of tribal nations to be involved in child welfare matters involving their citizens. This is a bit later on in the article. Imagine for a moment the plight of an Indigenous child caught in the turbulent currents of foster care, their fate hanging in the balance of a system that often fails to understand or honor their unique cultural needs. Picture the ache in their hearts as they are uprooted from the warmth of their ceremonies, torn away from the comforting embrace of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and extended family members who embody the very essence of love and stability. These familial bonds, are not mere titles or labels, but lifelines, anchors that ground them in their heritage, traditions, and ways of being. For many Indigenous children, these extended family structures are not only accepted, but celebrated, with aunts, uncles, older siblings, and grandparents traditionally assuming the role of parents, yet in the unfamiliar terrain of the child welfare system, this fundamental Indigenous understanding is often lost or dismissed. Indigenous children are at higher risk for depression and suicide and things like that. And the main point of this story here that I think is important, especially as a couple of left-wing guys who often critique the excesses of identity politics when the left weaponizes it, this is absolutely an example of the right wing weaponizing identity politics to turn a political issue like tribal association and tribal sovereignty into a racial issue. So the key thing to know here is that these tribal groups are not considered races of people. They are political groups with protections and rights that have been afforded to them by the government in exchange for stealing their fucking country. Right? And so that's why this is an important thing to get involved in, and we hope that the Supreme Court rules the correct way on this. It's interesting because you would think with a right-wing court like this, they're sure to rule the wrong way. However, they just ruled in favor of some voting protections. Brett Kavanaugh sided against the state of Alabama in a racial gerrymandering case. Yep. And, I have to say this. Kavanaugh, as much as he does not ideologically align with me, and as much as I opposed his nomination very fiercely based on the testimony of Christine Ford, who I think was telling the truth, he has been a surprisingly even-handed justice. He voted to uphold the ACA. Now, he voted this way on this recent case, and there was one other instance where he had a surprising vote where he ruled with the liberals. So it's interesting to see how this case will go, but obviously we're hoping for the best because this is just, what a sick lawsuit to begin with. That's what you were saying, Russell,
Well, it's very rare in regards to Kavanaugh. It's very rare that you get a Supreme Court justice who literally has no theory of the law. Most of them really are deeply committed to a particular view of the law and its analysis and its application. Whether you agree with a Scalia or not, his decisions were not based in being on the take or trying to favor a political party, except for a certain 2000 election, maybe.
Which we're allowed to talk about starting tomorrow, by the way.
Starting
rules
tomorrow.
go into effect tomorrow.
That's why I leaned in.
Yeah. 3 more hours.
Just starting tomorrow, I no longer have to make that magic gesture that protects us from getting strikes. A Clarence Thomas, who is literally just the fucking scum of the earth, not qualified to be on the court morally or intellectually. That's a rare thing. Most of them, whether you like it or not, they're very brilliant legal scholars with a certain view of the law. And that's why you wind up with decisions like the ACA decision. Everyone thought Roberts is going to come in and turn the court radically right wing. But if you look at their decisions, it's consistent with their theory of the law. So it's not really surprising that they ruled this way on Alabama if it conforms to their understanding of how the law should be interpreted. And that's why people are very often surprised when these right-wingers get on the court and make decisions like that, which is really not uncommon. It's really not, then you have Clarence Thomas, who's a disgrace to the bench.
Right.
Why people brought this case, I can't even imagine the mind of a person who felt, you know what? Native Americans haven't suffered enough.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
What we need to do is challenge their legal sovereignty and demand that their children be placed with whiteys. Because let's face it, that's who we're talking about, right? So why? Like, why would you? Are these people cutouts for a conservative organization? They just got people who had standing to bring the case and put them up to it. But then why would the conservative organization pick this fight? For what reason? There is no shortage of children to adopt. Why would you do this?
It's a terrible thing. One of the things that op-ed goes on to mention is the fact that a lot of people very perversely blame a lot of the pathologies that disproportionately affect native populations on the natives themselves. Well, if they're more predisposed to alcoholism, suicide, depression, literally, I mean, you talk about white saviorism. We have to adopt these kids and take them out of this situation, when obviously, it just goes without saying, like, anyone who's blaming the natives for those problems, those are diseases of despair that they suffer from. And it's very fucking obvious to any remotely historically literate human being why they would be predisposed to those things.
Well, by that logic, we should take children away from parents in the Rust Belt.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Please clap.